Hey, Warpugs. So, we have another Patreon request today, and this is from Real Gamers MMBR, and he asks, why are phaser strips this way? Now, this in particular is a Star Trek question, and who better to answer that than Certifiably Ingame? Now, phaser strips were always one of my favorite things about the Trek universe. There were they were uniquely to that universe, the concept of them, the way that they actually worked. I actually really enjoyed them the first time I saw them in TNG, and they have, the phase cannons, everything else like that. I always have enjoyed them. They have a lot of advantages. Heat dispersion being one of them, and the fact they have so many uses, not only as a weapon of war, but for, other applications. With Romulans, disruptors of disruptors, Romulans and Klingons, disruptors of disruptors. But with the Federation, they can use phasers to core out things, they can use them to push things along, heat up things, cool down things, everything that they want to do. And primarily that's because every single chief engineer in Starfleet is apparently the biggest Mary Sue in existence. So, we're going to get into the Why Are Phaser Strips This Way by Certifiably Ingame. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. You guys are trying to get me into Trek stuff. You guys are trying. I understand that. Let's get into it.
Hello all, Rick here with a quick video on the phaser emitters and how they have varied in time in Starfleet.
Yep.
Ship-mounted phaser emitters have come in several flavours in Star Trek, but are all based on the same technology. I've already covered the reason for their prevalence in Starfleet and what exactly phasers are, but in brief, a phaser beam is a charged stream of Nadian particles in a phased state. And Starfleet prefers this to the simpler disruptor systems because it offers greater versatility. Such mounted phaser technology began with the phase cannons in the 2150s, equipped to their first deep space vessels, and over the next 150 years or so, the technology never really changed, just grew more refined and powerful. The cannons gave way to turrets and the more general term of banks by the mid-23rd century, and operated in a multitude of firing modes. By this time, a phaser bank consisted of 2 ball cannons that operated in unison. These were placed tactically around the vessel at points to provide coverage, generally around the saucer section, then on the engineering hull, sometimes the pylons, but rarely the nacelles. Probably because you do not want such high energy systems running along the length of a warp nacelle.
Yeah, and generally you don't want anything to hit the warp nacelle either, just saying.
At a guess. These 2 emitters were placed generally in a square bracket and were readily identifiable on most ships, although vessels like the Constitution class had them mounted just above the sensor dome and were less obvious, at least in one iteration of their refits. They could fire both bolts of phaser energy and continual streams of lancing particles, both being used on different ships at different times. The colour of phasers also has changed with time, presumably varying with something like the frequency, from red, orange to blue to nearly pure white. In the 24th century, and moving forwards,
now, I have some theories about that. That will be mainly about areas of manufacture. Like, the Andorian weapons are blue. The Vulcans in Enterprise were the more golden that we normally see in the later stages, like TNG, stuff like that. Red, though, was probably human, considering the NX-01 had red phasers, and so did several like the Miranda class, things like that. They were engineered primarily by humanity. I think the Miranda class was actually constructed by a company. I can't remember what the name of the company was to save my life, though.
Starfleet adopted the phaser strip as its go-to armament for starships, replacing the previous system of phaser banks. We do not have an exact canon date for the first phaser strips equipped on starships, but we can see that the Ambassador class was equipped with them around its saucer section.
Yep.
Such a vessel, the Enterprise NCC 1701C, was lost in 2344, but the class was apocryphally described as entering service in the 2320s. The ships preceding this, like the Excelsior and Constitution classes, both featured turrets, and the former was introduced around the 2290s, suggesting the switchover occurred around the turn of the century, or a decade or two later. Additionally, the Constellation class vessels like the USS Stargazer NCC 2893 were still equipped with the 23rd century style phaser bank emitters.
Now, the Constellation class was actually based off an older model. It just simply added another nacelle. It had the same kind of essentially construction pattern. Most starships had the horizontal nacelles. The Constellation had vertical nacelles, and there was another ship. I can't remember the class to save my life, but the ship that the Constellation was based off of had a single nacelle that ran up instead of down.
These banks are completely still serviceable, and newer versions are still made and outfitted to ships, especially smaller craft like shuttles and runabouts. Additionally, the standard phaser bank would go on to be the base for the pulse phaser cannons seen on the Defiant.
Right.
I would say that the systems each have their benefits, but honestly, the phaser strip generally outplays the standard banks in pretty much every field.
And you can see why.
The biggest advantage of the strip is that it offers a wider field of fire, covering greater areas and leaving fewer blind spots than a setup of turrets would. The disadvantage is that it takes more time to install, and this is more integrated than a bank, which could be pulled out and replaced with ease.
Yes.
There's a lot more involved with a phaser array, or strip. The strip works as a line of emitters that are all linked together and can transfer their charge to the adjacent emitter, adding to the power as it coalesces along the length of the array until it reaches an optimal targeting position. It's then released and channeled towards the target in a beam. Each emitter in sequence is capable of firing independently too, but this would be at a much lower yield than a charged beam.
Right.
A potential disadvantage of the phaser strip was that they were far more visible when they were about to be fired, as you could see the energy run along the strip. But that's a minor weakness, considering the build-up is detected in advance by sensor systems anyway. The line of emitters being damaged is generally also not enough to incapacitate them totally either, although a damaged part of the array would no longer convect a charge. The phaser strip is...
It's just a better weapon overall, considering what the Federation ships are designed to do and their overall appearance. You couldn't do something... Well, you could do something like this with a Romulan vessel and maybe a Klingon vessel, but they would have... The dispersion would not be nearly as effective.
Still a standard armament now on most vessels, and they come in several types derived from the output, from the Type 4, the earliest models, to the Type 12, which we're seeing implementation around the turn of the 25th century. Suffice to say, they've become an iconic loadout for a Federation vessel, while other powers in the galaxy still prefer cannons or turrets. Starfleet is continuing to pioneer its phaser array strip, although they are always fielding new ideas. Thanks for watching this quick video on phaser strips. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time for another one. Thanks again, and goodbye. I'm not sorry.
What? Okay, just a real quick explanation. Just a real quick explanation about what they are. So I actually played the game that footage was drawn from, Star Trek Online. I played that for when the game came out. I played it continuously, and the problem was it was supposed to be portraying a war between the Klingons and Federation, which didn't go so well since, nobody was playing as the Klingons. And so what wound up happening was you had this. It was actually kind of hilarious because the second that people got their hands on the Excelsior, you could actually put 8 phaser banks on it, 8 phaser strips on it, and that thing would literally just start coring people out. But the problem for the Federation was they had a ton of players, and then on the Klingon side, you had a very small group of people who just really wanted to PvP. And if you take a very small group of people who are hyper-focused into PvP and put them up against people who are just like, oh, I'm going to go fight the war, blah, 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 and they want to play PvP, you're going to have Federation people that are hyper-focused into PvP, of course, but if you got a team of 20 on one side, and then you have a team of 20 on the other, and 20 people just intensely hyper-focused on min-maxing everything they can, on figuring out everything they possibly can about their stuff, and on the other side you maybe have 4 or 5 of those people. The only people I knew that wanted to play Klingon, half the people I met that were playing Klingon when I was playing Klingon, just wanted to blow stuff up and would just, you're talking birds of prey just wiping out sovereigns. It was hilarious how just insane it was at the first start of it. But once everybody figured out how to do beam boats, it was a whole ball game, because you had the same like uber tanked build on every single ship, uber tanked to absolute hell, and yeah, it caused problems. In any case, guys, this was a short but very informative video on phaser strips. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know you guys are trying to get me into Star Trek lore. I know a lot of this stuff already because this was the 40K for me before I learned about 40K. Voyager, DS9. When Enterprise first came out, I was really interested in it, even though there was a lot of problems. I don't know why people were so heavy into Scott Bakula. I was just not. I think he overacted legitimately every scene he was ever in. And it was painful at times. It was really painful at times to watch him. But that's neither here nor there. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, put a like down there. Leave a comment. Let me know. I am going to head out. I am not going to do Star Trek lore because, God, I could talk about it for hours. And the biggest thing about it is comparing 40K to Star Trek is just... for me. 40K took all the elements of Star Trek that I liked and gave them such a horrifying overture. In any case, I will catch you guys next time. I can't think of anything witty. Every once in a while it happens. I'll catch you later. I'm stupid. Brick. I'm a boomer.